Okay, we will finish globalization and global governance here. Um, then at the last video clip, I introduced you the global governance on environment. How globally use the global governance system to tackle global environmental issues, environmental problems. Then I'll talk about another one. That is the global financial problem. Um, First we have to trace back to 1944. 1994, 1994, 1944, during the Second World War, and in fact it is later period of the Second World War, and then at that period of time, the whole world, most of the people on the world foresaw that Japan and Germany will soon lose the war, but don't know why, when they will lose the war, but it's coming soon. Then they gathered to draft some proposal on how to set up some global governance or better say international organizations to tackle international problems after the Second World War. There, some countries on the world are drafting some proposal to do so. One of the gathering to draft some proposal to deal with international issues, is international financial issues. That gathering is in Bretton Woods, which is a small town in America. A small town in America. Um, Policymakers, mainly major countries on the world at that period of time, gathered in Bretton Woods, to consider how to reconstruct the post-war global economic system. Why they have to gather, and why this meeting is so important? Because it is mostly considered that the reason for the outbreak of Second World War is because of the Great Depression. The Great Depression, many people around the world lost their job, and then the unemployment rate sharply increased after the Great Depression. That's the reason why Germany wrote Hitler in 1932 to be the prime minister. Of course, not directly Hitler, but why people in Germany wrote Nazi Party in the parliamentary election, and that's the reason why Nazi Party came to power in 1932. The main reason is because of the Great Depression. People were German, they are hopeless. They were hopeless. So they were desperate to find a solution to deal with the economic problems. Then they wrote for Nazi Party. They hoped the Nazi Party would give them some effort to deal with the problem. But of course, it ended up in failure. Those, for those great powers, so those countries gathering in the Bretton Woods, they will find some solution to prevent another Great Depression again in the future. It is important because those countries consider that if there's no Great Depression, the Great Depression did not happen again, then it can prevent the outbreak of another world war. And secondly, a lot of destruction in Europe during the Second World War, and then they found method to rebuild the war-torn economies in Europe. The conference aimed at the following targets. Firstly, a stable exchange rate, and second is a reserve asset or unit of account. International capital flows could be controlled, availability of short-term loans to countries facing a temporary balance of payment prices, and routes to keep economies open to trade. Those are targets. And they considered to establish 3 international organizations to achieve those targets at the last page. Those organizations include the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, now it's called World Bank, and General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, GATT, Now it's called WTO. The Bretton Woods system, formally speaking, and with the collapse of golden standard exchange rate. What is golden standard exchange rate? As I mentioned, the first target of the Bretton Woods meeting is a stable exchange rate system. The most stable exchange rate system on the world is to peg all currency to gold. I take US dollar example. During the end of Cold World War to 1970, I think as far as I can recall, is 1971. That period of time, the president is President Nixon. President Nixon announced the end of the golden standard exchange rate. At that period, from 1945 to 1971, at that period of time, in fact, 23 US dollars can, in fact, the 23 US dollars is equivalent to 1 ounce of gold. That means if you take 25 US dollars to the Federal Exchange, Federal Reserve 聯邦儲備局, then you can get 1 ounce of gold. The Federal Reserve have to pay you 1 ounce of gold. That is golden standard exchange rate. But of course nowadays, the gold price is 1,700 US dollars. Can buy 1 ounce of gold, around more than $1,700. Why? Because this is the decision made by Nixon. He announced that US dollar no longer pegged to gold anymore, and then all other currencies follow, so they do not peg to gold anymore. So there's no stable exchange rate. In the past, before the end of this golden standard exchange rate, the exchange rate between different currencies is very, very stable, unless your countries face great economic crisis. But now the exchange rate varies. Like when I studied in Britain around 10 years ago, not 10, 13 years ago, 15 Hong Kong dollars equal to £1. That is £1. 50 Hong Kong dollars to £1. Now, it's 9.3 something Hong Kong dollars to £1. So you see, there's a lot of frustration in the exchange rate, and that's the result of the end of the collapse of golden standard exchange rate. But of course, the end of collapse of golden exchange rate just partly end the Bretton Woods system. But the legacy of the Bretton Woods system still lasts till today, because the Bretton Woods system forms 3 pillars of the current global economic governance system. That is, these 3 organizations. IMF is to stabilize international finance around the world. How to stabilize the international financial system is to stabilize the exchange rate and provide emergency assistance to countries facing a temporary crisis in the balance of payment. That is, if some countries they do not have enough money to pay for their debts, then they have to ask IMF to borrow money for them to pay the debts. One of the best examples is South Korea. South Korea faced a big financial crisis because South Koreans, the government itself, and also a lot of companies in South Korea, they own a lot of foreign debts, and the foreign debts are calculated in American dollars. But because of financial crisis, then South Korea, the government, also those firms, they don't have enough U.S. dollars to pay for, to return to pay for the, to return for the loan. That's like return for the loan. So South Korea, the whole state, nearly went bankrupt. Then IMF rescued them, and then borrowed lots of money to South Korea. But they have to face some, of course, when a country borrow money from IMF, they follow some so-called structural adjustments. That is, implement some austerity monetary policies. That is, to say, the government must reduce expenditure and then find some effort to increase its income, and then contraction of the roles of government. That is why the government have to reduce expenditure. They have to contract the role. Say they have to privatize a lot of services and then cut a lot of welfare. And also some guidelines of good governance. Like, yeah, your countries have to increase your transparency, have to say find some methods to tackle corruption, something like this. Well, I have loaned some money to those countries in need. Then these short-term loans help to simultaneously by enhancing the capacity to pay back through structural adjustment. Then with these two methods, the IMF hope to say help those countries which is facing the problem of it is facing the crisis of financial crisis to come across those crises. There are 185 countries who are members of IMF, and a country's contribution to IMF determines its percentage of voting rights. As if you contribute more to the country's contribution more to IMF, then they have more voting rights. Yeah. While U.S. Percentage voting rate is 70%, because U.S. Contributes 70% of the total IMF source of money, source of finance. Okay. The World Bank. IMF is to loan money for countries to come across temporary financial problems. World Bank different. World Bank's role is to help some directly borrow some money to countries for them to develop themselves, to say construct some say infrastructure works, or to say finance some so-called some programs to help to boost its economy. The best example is the World Bank loan a lot of money to African countries, so that those African countries set up their own small amount of loan institutions, and there's small amount of mini loan institution. We have like mini loan institution. These mini loan institutions borrow money to farmers in their countries and African countries, then borrow that money to them, and the interest rate is very low, less than 1%. Borrow money to them, and by borrowing money, then they can use the money, those farmers in African countries, to buy some maybe seeds, or to say buy some equipment to help them to farm. That is increase their agricultural products, and then help them to say help them to get richer. This kind of programs. Well, this is the money comes from World Bank. World Bank is borrow money for countries to develop. Then, of course, borrow money should. If a country borrow money from World Bank, then they still have to follow some so-called undertake specific reforms, and to abide by the so-called condition of good governance, say increased transparency, eradication of corruption, something like this, the same as IMF. And the voting right of IMF of World Bank is the same as IMF. It depends on it's in direct proportion to the country's share in the bank. That is their contribution to the bank. World Trade Organization. In fact, in 1947, this is the origin of World Trade Organization. That is General Agreement on Trade and Tariff. That is the origin of WTO. This is a place for states to meet to discuss tariffs and also to discuss how to eradicate the so-called trade barriers. Then in 1962 and 67, that's called Kennedy round of discussion. Countries decide to set up a more formal and organized international trade organization. GATT, GATT, is just a place for states to meet. It's not an organization. Of course, it's still an organization, but its function is limited to give states a place to meet. And then the states, they negotiate their trade problems and then tariff rates, something how to reduce their trade barriers. Their organization, other than allowing the state to meet, form a gathering place, no more functions anymore. They want an organization, state want organizations which can say settle trade disputes, and that's more formal organization. That's why they plan to set up WTO. In the Uruguay round, in 1986 to 1904, then that's a negotiation. The state decided to set up the WTO, which main function include administrating WTO trade agreements, being a form of trade negotiation, handling trade disputes, monitoring national trade policies, supplying technical assistance, training for developing countries, and coordinating with other international organizations. More functions than GATT. GATT is just a place to meet. WTO have more functions. WTO is more egalitarian in terms of membership, more equal for members of WTO. Its voting right is not in proportion to the contribution of member states. It's based on the principle of one country, one vote. Okay, then and some criticism on the global economic governance system. First of all is the structural adjustment. That is what I mentioned earlier, structural adjustment. They lay a shape by the market fundamentalism. That is, they think that market is efficient. Then if a country faces financial problems, then they have to run in a market-oriented manner, market-oriented approach. If you borrow money from IMF and World Bank, then these two organizations require you to say have some reforms in your own internal economic system to be more market-oriented. And that's a problem. In fact, the reform process, firstly, whether the market is most efficient is doubtful. But of course, the reform required by IMF and also World Bank really help some countries to enhance the economy eventually. Say South Korea. South Korea in the past its per capita GDP is less than Taiwan. But now its per capita GDP is more than Taiwan after the reform. So eventually, in many cases, the structural adjustment programs required by IMF and also World Bank really can help some countries. But this is eventually. During the process is very painful. For instance, Russia um, borrowed money from the IMF during 1990s, early 1990s, and then the IMF required Russia to say to launch some structural adjustment, and then Russia at that period of time, its life expectancy reduced sharply. Russian life expectancy reduced sharply during 1990s, during the period when the IMF required Russia to launch some structural reforms. From before 1990s, Russia, that is Soviet Union, the life expectancy is around 60-something years old. But now, not now, but after 1990, from 1991 to 1998, these 8 years, the life expectancy decreased to less than 60 years old. Why? Because those a lot of Russians lost their job, they're unemployed, they are very sad, and they drink a lot. That's why they get a lot of disease, like liver disease, caused by drinking. They drink very heavy alcohol, like vodka, so they get liver disease very easily because they drink heavily. So this structural adjustment process is very painful. Second, Western domination. It's what the decision made by the IMF and also WTO, not WTO, IMF, and also World Bank, because Western countries dominate in the decision-making process. So that's why decision-making process. So all decision, in fact, are favorable to Western countries, and WTO, the efforts to catch the tariffs, also is favorable to developing countries at the expense of developing countries, because developing countries can use tariff or trade barriers to nurture their so-called the native industries, like why Japan car industries are very developed, mainly because in the 1960s, the Japanese government set a very high tariff rate for importing cars into Japan. So Japanese car can have a big Japanese market, can enjoy a so-called monopoly in the whole Japanese market, and give Japanese car producers or car making enterprises a room to develop their car industries. That's why Japanese cars nowadays is very famous all around the globe. And then, but the IMF, sorry, the WTO, is requires states to tap tariffs and also eradicate trade barriers. That's why many countries cannot utilize these trade barriers to nurture their native industries. And also, this system, in fact, lead to instability in global economic system. The Asian financial crisis, 1997-1998, and also later, that is the 2007 and 2009 global financial crisis. All these crises during the late 1990s to early 2000, all financial crises, the main reason is because of the lack of control of global capital flow. So it leads to so-called casino capitalism. That is, there's a lot of mad money. They're mad money. They search around the globe for speculative bursts. They invest to some companies which